If anybody's got my daughter, my beautiful princess daughter, please bring her home safe.
High-profile crimes played out on the TV. A person goes missing, a body is found. The cameras arrive and the police make full use of the publicity.
I would urge anybody who knows anything about the death of my wife to come forward.
Desperate relatives appear to make appeals for information. It's emotional, it's raw, but sometimes it's fake.
If anyone has seen her, please let us know where she is.
Tonight, the UK's leading forensic psychologist and the foremost criminal body language expert in the world examine the tears, the lies, and the videotape.
The big challenge of lying is to keep the whole fiction unfolding and developing.
The best way to mask a lie is with a strong emotional display.
Could we have known they were lying?
I was absolutely taken in by it.
Felt like I'd been punched in the stomach by someone I trusted.
Were the signs there all along?
Police emergency. Hiya, I want to put my daughter is missing, please. Right, how old is she? 9. Yeah.
February the 19th, 2008. A distraught mother calls 999 to report her daughter missing. It's 6:48 in the evening, and the temperature is near freezing.
What's the caller? Shannon Matthews.
With that phone call, Karen Matthews triggers the biggest police action in West Yorkshire for 27 years. But is this a smokescreen for the real story? Local reporter Richard Edwards is one of the first to cover the story.
You think a 9-year-old girl, that is instantly of interest. But never in a million years did I think that the story would unfold the way it did.
CCTV photos shown across the world. The last sighting of missing schoolgirl Shannon Matthews.
Karen Matthews and her extended family live at Dewsbury Moor, an estate on the outskirts of Leeds. The strong sense of community here means that word soon spreads that Shannon Matthews is missing. Neighbours are quick to start helping the police search.
Everybody turned up, people that you don't normally see. You know that they live on the estate, but you've never spoke to them. Everybody was there, just trying to do their bit.
24 hours after she made the 999 call, the distraught mother, Karen Matthews, comes out of the house to make an appeal before the TV cameras.
Shannon, if you're out there, please, darling, come home. We love you so much. Me and your dad, your brothers, your sisters, everybody loves you. Your dad's missing you so much, Shannon. He's even out looking for you. Please come home, Shannon. If you're out there, come home. If anybody's got my daughter, my beautiful princess daughter, please bring her home safe. I need her home.
Not only were the words that she was using all absolutely spot on, as though she'd scripted those, full of emotion. It was her physical appearance as well that was absolutely striking. She was every inch the mother who didn't know what to do, didn't know where to turn. I mean, you look at her eyes, they are the eyes of a woman in utter despair.
But to a body language expert like Professor Paul Ekman, there's more to Karen's behaviour than is immediately obvious.
It's very small. That shoulder goes up a little bit, twice in a row. Behavior doesn't occur randomly. It's like a slip of the tongue. This is a gestural slip. She doesn't know she's doing it. Every time we have seen it, and we have seen it in many situations, the person has always been lying.
Once again, the police helicopter hovered over Dewsbury Moor, which once again is determined to leave no patch of ground within sight of Shannon's front door unchecked.
For the media, now encamped in Dewsbury Moor, Karen Matthews and her partner, Craig Meehan, sound and look like anxious parents.
Are you hoping that this time next week you haven't got to have something like this?
I'm hoping it's on by then.
But away from the camera lens, people begin to notice a different Karen.
Now, a live broadcast came on that was actually taking place in the street outside the house. So one of the people in the house decided to test just how live it was by waving to the camera outside and rustling the curtains around. Then when this appeared on screen about a second later, there was a big cheer in the room, and Karen was one of those cheering. Now, that seemed, that jarred.
Well, looking back now, yes, you were shy and tearful in front of the cameras and really outgoing, laughed a lot and joked when there were no cameras around. She saw the cameras walking down and she was jumping up and down and laughing in Community House. But I just put that down to nerves.
Karen just didn't quite seem concerned enough. When she saw Shannon's face on the screen, said, "Here's Shannon, she's famous." I remember thinking, no, she's not famous, she's missing.
Police have left no stone unturned in their search for the 9-year-old. Every possible hiding place is being examined.
Shannon Matthews has been missing for 7 days. Still, the search produces no clues. The police are under pressure. The Madeleine McCann case is in the forefront of people's minds, and police in West Yorkshire want to avoid the criticisms of the Portuguese investigation.
This is the biggest operation in my 28-year service that I've been involved in, and it is important that we do this work in order to find Shannon.
13 days after Shannon is first reported missing, the police set up a press conference to appeal for help. But it's a changed Karen Matthews who appears on stage.
Now at this one, Karen's face is enormously different. The red rings from her eyes have eased a lot. She still looks pale, but she looks almost serene. She's so calm.
Well, it's hard to sleep, really. It's just... I house don't feel the same with them not being there, really. It just feels empty.
There's a certain distance in what she's saying. She's not really expressing how she feels. She's actually saying what she wants people to know.
Whoever's got Shannon, just please let her go. Her family's missing her, all her friends are missing her at school.
We see very little signs of anguish, of anxiety, of fear. That is rather flat emotionally. But why should it be there? She knows her daughter is just fine.
Well, I think that somebody out there who knows Shannon was supposed to probably know me as well. And it's just, I just want her home safe, really.
Pretty well everything she says is actually the truth. She says that Shannon is probably with somebody who knows her.
It makes me think now I can't trust people who's really close to me anymore. I just can't trust them.
She actually draws on what she knows to be the truth in order to keep the whole fiction alive.
She doesn't cry at all until towards the end, when she is asked by the reporter if she can remember the last words that she and Shannon exchanged.
I said, "Take time, Mum, love you."
Then the tears come. So was that Karen, again, the actress, turning the tears on, or were those words genuinely said and they did pluck at Karen's heartstrings?
So now we see some genuine emotion. Why it occurs at this point, I have no idea. But the fact that she is capable of it tells us that its absence, right from the start, in the earliest points when you would expect to see it most severely, is suspicious.
Then Karen picks up Shannon's favourite teddy bear and holds it very close to her face and poses for pictures that way. And it's a scene that is heavily defined, as was much of the Shannon case, by the McCann's trauma.
She doesn't know quite what to do with it. It's totally different from the way Kate McCann carried the teddy everywhere with her as some sort of reassurance of her daughter.
I think that is one of the most striking images of the whole Shannon situation.
Press conference over, Karen Matthews' behaviour away from the cameras is getting harder to ignore.
I remember going into the chip shop. Karen ordered fish and chips and some other stuff, and I ordered my dinner. And the guy in the fish shop says, "That's all right, Karen, it's on us." And she turned round, started giggling, bald as brass, and said, "I should get rid of one of my kids more often."
We'd arranged to go to see them to discuss a story idea for the following day. So turned up, knocked on the door and walked in, and the house was empty. And then the next thing I heard was someone shouting "boo," and then it was Karen. She'd been hiding behind the living room door, leapt out and tickled me on my sides, and now I was absolutely flabbergasted by that. I mean, what do you make of that?
On the 6th of March, Karen gives an interview to GMTV.
Wherever she is, she's going to be frightened, and it's just breaking. Everybody's out on the street.
And what would you say to anyone holding Shannon?
Just let her go.
Just let her go. This is a no. This is a yes.
Just let her go.
So she's caught in a conflict between please let her go and don't let her go. You've got to keep her so I can get something from this. It's another gestural slip.
The more Karen Matthews appears on camera, the more her behaviour is starting to raise eyebrows, even to the untrained eye.
She almost at times gives a strange half a smile.
If you're an anguished mother, we wouldn't expect that you would be smiling. She's getting a kick out of being able to pull the wool over the eyes of the community and the police, as she thinks this whole plot is going to succeed. And so far it is succeeding. She's on television, the community's supporting her, everyone believes her.
On a number of occasions, she seems to have a slight sort of, some people might call it a smirk, but a slight upturn of the lips. And I think that's actually an indication of embarrassment of what's going on, which a person emotionally engaged with the whole process and telling the truth wouldn't really express. There are a few occasions when she looks to Craig and you wonder, is she thinking to herself, I wonder if he knows the truth? It sort of implies she's checking him out. But then she will turn her head into his shoulder, which is a way of getting her face away from the crowd and just hiding any sort of emotional expression.
And there's a new tactic, deflecting attention from herself by shifting the focus to Shannon's best friend, 8-year-old Megan Aldridge.
She definitely owes Megan. Let Megan stand here with me and Craig. Let Megan do this, let Megan do that.
Her bestest friend, Megan Aldridge, is missing her because she's the only friend that she's got is Shannon.
One time when they were releasing balloons, Megan didn't want to write a message for Shannon. And Karen said to Megan, you'll write this message and Shannon will get it and come home. I thought Karen was taking comfort in Megan, but looking at it now, it was just another piece of a plan, that's all it was. You were a bit of extra leverage, definitely.
After 24 days of searching, there is astounding news.
The long search for Shannon Matthews ended just over a mile from her home. The police's trail of inquiries led them to the upstairs flat of a man who lived alone. The back door kicked in by police who went inside to find 9-year-old Shannon hidden in the base of a divan bed.
I was at home, on my day off, the phone rang, and it was my boss. So she said, yeah, Shannon's been found in a flat in Batley Car. And we knew very little at that point about it other than that she was safe. So I rang Julie, and the first thing Julie was shouting down the phone to me was, is it true?
It's true! No.
Yesterday, ITV News filmed as family and friends realised Shannon was alive.
But Shannon's reappearance is not the end of the story. As we'll see, the biggest drama is yet to come.
It was just before 9 o'clock this morning that a man on his way to work discovered Carol Wardell's body beside bushes in a lay-by.
14 years before the Karen Matthews case, the TV cameras recorded another sensational appeal for help. There'd been a murder in Warwickshire.
Detectives went to her home and found her husband bound and gagged and in a severely distressed state.
Detective Superintendent Tony Bayliss was in charge of the investigation.
I drove here and arrived at the scene and found Carol Wardell's body lying here.
Then staff at the Woolwich Building Society in Nuneaton called police to say they couldn't get in because their assistant manageress, Mrs. Wardell, hadn't turned up for work.
Our theory was that it was a professional robbery in which Mr. Wardell had been held captive at his home. Mrs. Wardell had been forcibly taken to the Building Society and forced to open the safe, and that for some reason after that she'd been killed.
This was a huge story, a story like one I hadn't covered before.
The police hold a press conference featuring their star witness, the victim's husband, Gordon Wardell.
I thought it was very important for Gordon Wardell to take part in this press conference because I knew that it would keep the media interest alive and thereby give us more chance of getting information in from members of the public.
And would urge anybody who knows anything about the death of my wife to come forward.
His account was that he had been out to post a letter for Carol, gone for a pint in the Brooklands, driven back to Meriden, walked into his home, smelt cigarette smoke in the home of two non-smokers, walked into the lounge, and there was Carol trussed up at knife point.
And then as I walked into the lounge, I was grabbed. It's the first time I saw my wife.
But the assembled press corps smelt a rat.
There was no medical need for him to be in a wheelchair whatsoever. There was some token sort of hoarseness of the voice, soft speaking.
A man had got hold of my wife and was threatening her with a knife. I was grabbed from both sides of the back and forced down. He was wearing a clown's mask and a dark blue boiler top suit.
Almost from the word go, the story didn't seem right. The clown's mask seemed to be an unlikely extra detail.
I lost consciousness and didn't. The next thing I know, I was on the floor, bound and gagged.
No sense of grief, no sense of loss, no sense of outrage, no real anguish at all. Just cold fish.
Well, obviously, following the press conference, we were hoping that would stimulate a lot of public interest. Unfortunately, it had the effect that a lot of people came to the view that it was Mr. Wardell who was responsible for the offence. And I even received a phone call from my mother who said, more or less, what are you messing about at? It's obviously that husband who did it.
If you're listening to him, you don't feel upset for him. The natural human process of empathy somehow isn't triggered.
I've learnt after many years of police experience not to make snap judgments about people just on the way they happen to behave in a particular set of circumstances. It's far more complex than that, and when you're dealing with a serious case like this, a murder investigation, you have to keep an open mind and only go where the evidence takes you.
The police stage a reconstruction of Wardell's movements on the night his wife died.
Mr. Wardell had retraced every step he said he made on the night before the Building Society robbery. Mr. Wardell said he hoped the police would make a breakthrough soon.
Hopefully, yes. That's why I'm trying to do anything that I can to help.
The reconstruction was just more of the same, really. Cold, emotionless, calculating, unblinking, just as he'd been at the press conference.
Wardell's story starts to unravel.
He claimed to have been bantering with one of the bar staff.
No, I didn't serve the man, and all the staff have signed police statements to say they don't recall seeing it.
His story was falling apart in front of his eyes, and he would have been blind and stupid not to see that.
It's the fine detail of his lies that lead to Gordon Wardell's undoing.
He had said that a cloth was placed over his mouth and he smelt chemicals. And the next thing was he came round 8 or 9 hours after he said he was attacked. And an eminent member of the Royal College of Anaesthetists contacted our incident room and said that he knew of no anaesthetic that would have this particular effect.
I asked a question later. Had he wet himself? 2 pints? Tied up all night?
There was no evidence that he'd urinated. This was nigh impossible. A forensic examination of the house didn't show any third parties had been in that house on the evening concerned. And it was a combination of things. It was a very complex circumstantial case against Mr. Wardell.
Gordon Wardell is very interesting in contrast to Karen Matthews because he takes a totally different approach. If you watch what he's doing, he is giving an account that he's carefully thought out, carefully rehearsed, developed, and then put this all together.
The jury unanimously declared Wardell guilty. He was sentenced to life imprisonment.
The elaborate story that he tells the police suggests this was premeditated, because that would take preparation to think through. So it's likely that this wasn't momentary loss of impulse control in an argument that turned violent. It's likely that he knew what he was going to do, prepared an elaborate story, memorized it, so he could give it again and again consistently.
The whole thing was utterly unconvincing, from the word go, really. I mean, it was fairly dreadful acting. I mean, it is very difficult to act. He was determined, but in terms of being convincing, not very good at all.
Most killers try in vain to cover their tracks, but only a few are brazen enough to stand in front of TV cameras and lie to the world. In May 2006 in northwest London, Fadi Nasri paid another man to murder his wife, Nisha.
She came out of her house in her nightclothes to investigate a disturbance. Her husband had gone out to play snooker. He was called back by the neighbours to find her lying in a pool of blood.
She had a good heart, always very, very bubbly, always willing to help everyone. Everyone's grieving and missing her very much. Still in shock.
One of the challenges of lying is to continue to invent and to give information that you are developing. So one of the ways in which people cope with lying is actually by avoiding saying anything that's not true.
The fact that Nasri didn't commit the actual murder himself may have made that easier.
Obviously, someone's got a guilty conscience. They'll be worrying about what they've done, or shocked, or maybe it was an accident or mistake, or whatever. You know, but someone has got to know something.
Soham, Cambridgeshire, 2002. One of the most infamous killers in recent times, Ian Huntley. Interviewed 11 days after murdering schoolgirls Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, he betrays no hint of emotion.
It doesn't help the fact that I was one of the last people to speak to them, if not the last person to speak to them. I keep reliving that conversation and thinking perhaps something different could have been said. Perhaps kept them here a little bit longer, maybe changed events.
And of course, at the time, it was just a normal chat with two girls that you knew.
Well, that's just it, I didn't even know them.
If you listen to what he says, he actually says, I was the last person to see them.
I was one of the last people to speak to them, if not the last person to speak to them.
How does he know he was the last person? If they were abducted by somebody else would have seen them.
Other killers don't appear so composed under the spotlight. The ones that look for public sympathy by shedding tears.
I love her to bits. I just want her back.
But what lies behind the tears? Are they for real or just for show? It's rare for there to be a high-profile criminal case in Britain without a major TV and media press conference or personal appeal, often transmitted live into the nation's living rooms. The bereaved relative is put before the cameras to help the police gather vital evidence and to elicit sympathy from the public.
Saturday she didn't come out.
The emotion appears raw, but sometimes it's fake.
It's now more than 3 weeks since mother of two, Kirsty Gifford Hull, was reported missing from her home in Winchester, and 5 days ago her husband Michael made an emotional appeal for information.
Please come back. I want you back. The kids want you back. Kids need you back. I need you back. Please get in touch. And please come back.
Less than 3 weeks before this press conference, this same man, Gifford Hull, had murdered his wife and buried her in nearby woods.
You just know that at the back of their eyes, they're thinking, how did I ever get here? How did I get into this? Why did I ever think that killing this person or committing this terrible act was going to be a good idea that solved my problem?
And if anyone has seen her, please let us know where she is.
Normally in a blink, it's open and closes in an instant, but he'll do a longer eyelid closure, which we have found in the past is a sign that the person is thinking a lot about what to say.
There's two small children who are going frantic, who are desperate for their mother. Thank you.
Eventually, they probably managed to squeeze out a few crocodile tears, thinking of something sad, but they're not crying for their lost loved one or whatever they've done, they're crying for themselves.
People are impressed by the tears that are generated by a lot of these people who fake grief. But talk to any actor about how they generate tears. They do it by drawing upon their actual emotional experience. And in these cases, the individuals are going through certain emotional traumas in relation to what they've been involved in.
Like Paul Dyson, who strangled his fiancée Joanne Nelson in Hull in 2005.
Yesterday, it was the turn of her boyfriend to appeal for the woman you said was 1 in a million to get in touch.
It's absolutely beautiful. Real bubbly, real outgoing, real forward. Really friendly. I love her.
The best way to mask a lie is with a strong emotional display that could be appropriate to the situation.
He'd murdered Joanne on a Sunday morning, the day before Valentine's Day. He spent Sunday afternoon clearing the evidence and disposing of her body. CCTV footage from a local shop shows Dyson buying cleaning products and bin bags, which he then uses to wrap Joanne's body. And at this petrol station, Dyson casually buys petrol while his girlfriend's body lies in the boot of the car. But to a TV crew, he'd given a detailed account of a loving Monday morning kiss and cuddle. The reality was, he'd already buried her body.
But Monday morning, because I couldn't get Valentine's Day off, we swapped cards upstairs. I gave her a kiss and a cuddle, got ready for work, and she was going to get her head down for another hour or so. I'm back in bed, cuddled up to her again. Kissed her goodbye and went to work.
He is crying about what he's done.
I love her to bits. I just want her back.
He says of his victim, she's the only person I ever loved. I would like her back. Clearly he is deeply upset about what he's done, but we interpret it as if he's really asking for somebody to come forward.
I want to know where she is.
You can see that he has an enormous amount of remorse about what he did. And that's what he's expressing, and therefore it's not surprising that he did actually eventually confess.
December 1996, Alvechurch, just south of Birmingham. The case that almost defines the phrase crocodile tears. This time, though, the murderer does not confess their guilt. Former glamour model Tracy Andrews is a passenger in a car driven by her fiancé, Lee Harvey. They're on the way home from a night at the pub. They get into a road rage wrangle with another car. It escalates out of control, and Lee is murdered. At least, that's what Tracy Andrews tells the police.
It was a huge story. Road rage was the flavour of the month in terms of news. There have been various incidents. It was a new concept. Nobody could quite believe at that time that people would get out of their cars and start fighting each other over some imagined slight which had happened on the road. And now here we had a road rage murder. And not only was it a road rage murder, but it involved a pretty blonde and additionally her boyfriend, a good-looking young man.
Here, Lee Harvey lost his life because of road rage. His Escort Turbo was chased from Bromsgrove to Alvechurch at 60 miles an hour down narrow country lanes.
There was no evidence to contradict what Tracy was saying at that stage. Hers was the only evidence that the inquiry had at that particular moment. It was feasible. We had to go forward on what she was saying.
Immediately, the police call a press conference. Tracy Andrews takes centre stage.
At Redditch Police Station, Lee Harvey's girlfriend, accompanied by his parents, bravely came forward to appeal for information.
I was astonished that this young lady was being put up to the media so quickly.
The police are well aware that the media is a very effective tool, and particularly in these sort of cases where you haven't got a lot of evidence to start off with.
When she walked through the door, the atmosphere was electric. All the photographers' motor drives started going off immediately like a choir. That always adds to the tension, the expectation, the electricity. And there was a tremendous sense of anticipation as she was shown to her chair.
Both Lee and the other person were like playing cat and mouse with each other for a while.
She was clearly upset. She was shivering. She was pale. She had all the hallmarks of a woman who'd been through this sort of ordeal.
We had seen pictures by that time of she'd posed for some modelling shots with her face fully made up. The person that presented herself was in totally marked contrast to that. No makeup, obviously, black eyes, black and bruised face, red-eyed. She looked every inch the victim that she was portraying herself to be.
I got out of the car because I'm not the sort of person to sit there. I got out of the car and then I went over to the man. We had a confrontation and he hit me. I can't remember. I fell to the floor. I can't remember if I was knocked out for a bit or what, I don't know.
The interesting thing about Tracy Andrews is she was a model. So she's actually quite used to being in front of cameras and photographed. And I think her confidence in giving an account of what happened to her and her willingness to portray it is drawing on her being used to be in front of cameras, and she has her hair down in front of her face so that she doesn't actually need to show too much of her face in this process.
But there was a moment about halfway through where she started to mention the starry eyes of one of the men who had apparently been involved in the attack on Lee.
It was just the way he looked. His eyes was, he had starry eyes.
And her eyes flashed. And what you saw in that moment was that this woman is capable of rage. And again, all the motor drives hit instantly on that moment. Even if you just kind of missed it or she'd been looking the other way or whatever, the fact that all the photographers reacted meant that everybody's eyes were focused on this brief flash of anger, which was instantly controlled and contained.
She gives an account without being asked questions, without being prompted. That suggests that she prepared what she would say. She did her homework.
Tracy grows in confidence as she tells her story, and she takes one step further than the police expect.
The driver walked off. It was nothing to do with the driver. And all I want to say is, please, will the driver of the car just come forward, because you are not to blame for this. And I know that.
So often when you see someone involved in these situations, in these press conferences, they kind of over-egg the pudding, they overdo the story, they get the details wrong.
Please, just tell us who he is, because you won't get in any trouble at all. It was not your fault.
Now, you just have to think about this. This guy, the driver, had been involved in, according to Tracy, a cat-and-mouse game in which he pursued them up country lanes. He was absolutely complicit in what happened. He may not have dealt the actual blows, according to her story, but he's the one who overtook their car. He's the one that forced their car to a halt. He is utterly complicit. How can he be forgiven 48 hours later?
If she was lying, then I didn't want to stop her lying. I wanted her to lie even more.
We all gathered outside, as we tend to do, and just sort of said, what do you think? And we all kind of looked at each other, and I thought, I think she did it.
After the press conference, we were going to move on into things like timelines and fine detail and all of that sort of thing, making sure that we got the exact story. And then we found that she'd taken this overdose. You might have no doubt about it that there was a serious attempt by her to commit suicide.
While Tracy Andrews recovers from her attempted suicide in the Alexandra Hospital in Redditch, the evidence against her begins to mount up.
We now knew that the timings didn't add up. However you stacked it, however you tried to do it, and we drove the route ourselves and did all that kind of stuff, you just could not make what was alleged to have happened fit in that timescale.
This murder had actually happened outside Cooper's cottage, and obviously the little girl that lived there had given her statement to the police, and she thought that there was a man and a woman arguing. That was her description of what went on.
And we had heard about a man and a woman who had been driving on a route that coincided with Lee Harvey's and Tracy Andrews that night. Their paths had crossed, and they saw no sign whatsoever of a pursuing car.
On the Saturday, she was released from the Alexandra and she was arrested.
The police said it was a knife like this one with which Lee Harvey was stabbed. Bloodstains on Andrew's sweater also showed she was very close to Harvey when he was attacked.
He must have struck her in the face. She has got out of the car, he's got out of the car. The forensic evidence indicated that they'd met at the back of the car, and she's turned around and she stabbed him straight in the neck. She must have totally lost all control, and I envisaged that at this stage she was sat over him, repeatedly stabbing at his neck. Lee had been stabbed 42 times in total. At the trial, I didn't feel any more confident than 50-50 that we would obtain a conviction in this case.
Juries give the benefit of the doubt. And I was by no means convinced that a jury would convict on the evidence. By no means convinced.
She sat there with crocodile tears, and she sat there and she lied to the world and to me.
She'd convinced herself that there was feasibility in this, and all she had to do was stick to the script and keep going.
And the prosecution QC just took her story apart over 3 days. When you thought there was nothing more he could ask her, he just kept on remorselessly going over her story with her, checking the details. And there were some parts of her story that she apparently remembered in great detail perfectly, and other parts of it that all she could say was constantly, I don't know, I can't remember, I don't know. And in the end, the cumulative effect of all that I don't know, I can't remember, was just, it's an invented story.
She was branded a killer by the police, a woman of profound deceit by the prosecution, and the jury agreed. In through the front door, 90 minutes later, she was in a cell waiting to go out the back door in a prison van.
For Lee Harvey's mother, who'd even held hands with Tracy at the press conference, it was the story she didn't want to hear.
I wanted it to be the story that she'd told, and I preferred that story. I wanted Lee to die in the arms of his lover, not at the hands of his lover. And this is what had happened. She'd stabbed him, and he died at the hands of his fiancée, the girl that he was going to marry.
It was the betrayal of a lover. After the break, how the world discovered the betrayal of a mother.
The long search for Shannon Matthews ended just over a mile from her home.
Their hunt leads to a house in Dewsbury. Shannon Matthews is found alive.
The back door kicked in by police who went inside to find 9-year-old Shannon hidden in the base of a divan bed.
When Shannon Matthews was found alive after being missing for 24 days, there was nationwide relief. In Dewsbury Moor, where the people had put so much effort into finding her, it's a time for celebration.
Shannon! Shannon! Shannon!
But one person didn't seem to be sharing the celebratory mood. Shannon's mother, Karen.
When Shannon was found and Craigall filmed she seems a bit shocked and surprised about the whole situation. She would be thinking to herself, I wonder how she's been found, I wonder what's going on, and that's clearly expressed on her face.
She even needs to be told to look happy.
We were watching it on the telly, and we're giving it, God, she ain't smiling, she ain't smiling. So we just opened the front door slightly and shouted, for God's sake, Karen, smile.
My suspicions really started to prickle that something wasn't right was within 24 hours of Shannon being found.
Shannon had been found in the house of Michael Donovan, who it turns out is the uncle of Karen's partner, Craig.
Once it was released who Shannon was found with, then people's minds started thinking, well, hang on, we're family. It just didn't make sense.
3 days later, Donovan is charged with kidnapping and false imprisonment. But the spotlight was turning onto Karen herself. Had Karen known where her daughter was all along?
Well, I think there's somebody out there who knows Shannon. Supposed to probably know me as well.
Had Karen allowed Shannon to be abducted? If so, why had she done it?
The rumours, and I'm not sure where they were coming from, but the community were fantastically well informed, really started to crank up that Karen had some sort of involvement.
Local women Natalie Brown and Julie Bushby decide to confront Karen with their theory of what she had done.
Well, basically, me and Natalie was sat talking on the Saturday night, and Natalie went, do you know, I'd love to be able to speak to Karen. So I went, well, I'll see if I can arrange it if you want. So we met her at 6 o'clock down in Batley.
Karen is driven to the rendezvous by her police liaison officer, Christine Freeman.
Then the two women got into the back of Christine and Karen's car, and Natalie said that the rumours had been going around the estate and asked her quite bluntly, were you involved, saying to her she believed that Karen had known where Shannon was all along, and Karen replied, yes, it's true.
She was sobbing, and there weren't crocodile tears, there were proper tears. There was proper tears. It was the first time I'd actually heard her cry that way.
Karen was immediately arrested.
We weren't looking for all the signs then. We have now, obviously, we've sat down and thought about it, and there is a lot of telltale signs there. But at that moment in time, it wasn't about Karen. It was about a 9-year-old child.
She told that many lies to me and everybody else. She just made a fool of everyone.
Those performances were Oscar-winning, and I don't hesitate to hold my hands up and say that I, like everyone else, was absolutely taken in by her.
People felt anger, frustration. Yeah, I suppose they felt a lot like me, used and abused.
Everyone just got taken for idiots, and I think everybody just pulled back after that. Just being used and made to look stupid.
Felt like I'd been punched in the stomach by someone I trusted.
She'll get out, sell her story, no doubt, and she'll be off. No problems. It's Shannon now, and Shannon's brothers and sisters as well. She's at all them people and she's not bothered, as long as she's all right herself.
Karen Matthews and Michael Donovan were both sentenced to 8 years for kidnapping and falsely imprisoning Shannon. Even after the trial, it was still no clearer why Karen had allowed her own daughter to be abducted.
To be honest, I just told Megan straight away it was Shannon's mum what had something to do with it. Why? Why would her mum do that to her? I can't tell you that, I had no idea. And then it's just, why?
I think the claim that Karen and Donovan were somehow or other setting things up to get some reward money for finding Shannon doesn't really hold a lot of water. It's very difficult to work out how they thought that could happen.
I personally don't think it was for the reward. I don't know what it was for. I don't know. It could have been attention.
It's now a year since Karen was arrested. Is she ready to give us any more answers? Julie Bushby visits Karen in prison to see if she's ready to talk.
I just said, why did you do it? And she just glared at me, actually. and then says, I didn't do it. She's adamant, she's totally innocent, absolutely adamant. I mean, a year on and she's still coming out with the same story. But she's still claiming that she's innocent and she's being used as the scapegoat. But I think she's lied to herself that much that she's convinced herself. But it was worth a try.
Have Karen and others like her made it impossible now for anyone else in that situation to be believed?
If someone goes missing and you come on TV and appeal for them, straight away people are going to think you've got something to do with it. This is what's annoying. There's genuine people out there who do want the loved ones back and they're missing and they are innocent, but it's people like Karen and others what make you question them.
You'll always be there looking now, looking for a telltale sign in their eyes, the mouth, the words, looking for that little grin.
People will always be curious about whether they're telling the truth or not. And I think now, with all these cases of crocodile tears, the public will be even more sceptical.
As a result of the Tracy Andrews case, I am more sceptical about victims. You know, you start to look to see if you can spot the flaws. You start to think about whether they've set themselves on this sort of story or not.
I'd do it again. If a child went missing again, I'd do it again.
I don't think my attitudes has changed. I think that that genuine people making public appeals touch my heart now just as much as they ever did. And I can give you an example. The McCanns, clearly innocent, absolutely clearly innocent, and they have my greatest sympathy. Nothing's changed.
What I've been concentrating on, as hopefully have a lot of people, is that there is actually a happy ending to this, in that Shannon was found, she was found safe, and she's now going to go on to a better life.
Well, the boys are about to get up to mischief after consuming lots of alcohol in Clocking Off over on ITV3 next. Here on ITV1 after the news, it's our big movie. Arnold Schwarzenegger is the last action hero.